talking diversity in The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Yes, the new Amazon show, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, has a diversity problem. A ton of people, apparently including some of the cast, are talking about it, so let's cut through some of the noise if we can. There are many problems with the Rings of Power, be it lack of stakes or depth of character regarding Galadriel, the lack of sense of wonder or awe in the lore or universe that we experienced in the Peter Jackson films, the fact that Amazon-owned IMDb curb-stomped bad reviews, thereby negating the value of that aspect of their website. But the biggest issue, because it's the most contentious and the easiest to monetize, is the racial one. This show, like so many others, took the route of prioritizing race over story, and the casting choices lack nuance and coherence in universe. But apparently pointing this out has led to the typical cries of racism against the confused, bewildered, and upset viewers. But this lazy take of, if you disagree with me, you're a racist, is as tired as the plot devices in your average procedural crime show. Everybody I've spoken to liked the Black Dwarf, with her and Dwarf Prince Durin largely being favorite characters, to which I agree. The scenes with Elrond and Prince Durin are my favorite scenes of the show. But despite me thinking she did a fairly splendid job, a little struggling with the accent aside, the only things I didn't like about her character were costuming, which is out of the actress's control, and her being black in her station in life as a dwarf, because it doesn't quite make sense unless it's explained. This is true of all of the racial tokenism that's shoved into this show, be it the singular racially diverse elf or the few black Harfoots. And I call it the tokenism of Tolkien because you'll notice a few things if you watch the show. All of the shown relationships are multicultural. Every husband and wife that you see on screen, or parent and child, there is an element of diversity. The dwarf prince, white, is married to a black dwarf. The white Harfoot father of our lead protagonist Harfoot is married to a diverse Harfoot. The human woman in town seems to have a biracial son and in the very least shares romantic feelings with our diverse elf. Diversity here isn't in the background, it's shoved into your face in every possible way and without explanation. And the reason for this is the sheer and utter sake of diversity. The problem here isn't one of diversity per se. As I stated, I think the dwarf wife is splendid. But how is she black? And before you say it's a fantasy show, it should still make sense, shouldn't it? Tolkien was famous for his lore, his backstory. Hell, he wrote an entire language for his characters. He didn't shy away from details. But in this show, we're supposed to go with diverse casting for the sake of diverse casting, because diversity is the right thing to do, I guess. No explanation of the peoples, no lore or backstory, no depth. Just look at how happily diverse everything is and go with it. The characters don't see color. It's just every other feature that they have biases and grudges over. The different species don't commingle because of history, biases, prejudices, and so forth, or so we're left to surmise, but for whatever reason, they draw the line of discrimination at skin color. Even beyond the lore problem, we have a logistics problem. Nowhere in humanoid existence is there a place where people, naturally, all look different with vastly different skin tones, eye shapes, and a level of diversity we see in this show amongst a singular species. We rarely see this type of biodiversity even in nature, in any species, as species tend to evolve to survive specific circumstances. This is why darker-skinned people are from the equator and lighter-skinned people are closer to the poles. The only places you see vastly diverse cultures are either trading hubs along trade routes between typically ethnocentric communities, or in places rife with warfare and colonialism. For there to be a black elf, a singular one or even a few, raises questions of elf races and elf wars and elf colonialism. Otherwise, the elves would all be black, white, or something in between. The same goes for the dwarves. To show different races of dwarves means that there are different regions of dwarves that evolve differently over vast amounts of time. We're asked to not notice this, otherwise we're racist. We, the audience, so far, are being asked to suspend our disbelief and ignore any semblance of reality or lore in the naive hopes that the showrunners will take care with the backstories, history, lore, mythos, etc., when the industry as a whole deserves zero trust or faith on these or really any issues. So again, the diversity per se isn't the problem, it's rather the illogical diversity. It might have made sense for all of the elves or dwarves or humans or Harfoots to be black or at least not white, but not for just a few of them scattered across the most important peripheral characters. If you want to have an outlier character, or characters, you have to make them make sense. I'll illustrate this point with, of all things, the Smurfs. In the original stories from so long ago, Smurfs were delivered by a stork and were all male. There were 99 of them until later stories came out. The one female Smurf, the outlier here, was created by Gargamel out of clay as a spy to help capture the Smurfs. Then, Papa Smurf turned her good and for whatever reason, blonde, and lo and behold, we have Smurfette. Sassette was likewise created using magic because all Smurfs are delivered male. The very existence of these female Smurfs as outliers was made to make sense and is part of the universe. Not so much in the most recent and pretty terrible Smurf movie where they introduce an entire village of female girl boss Smurfs who just exist for reasons. So we're introduced to the idea that different sexes of Smurfs exist in nature. They pine for one another and yet don't coexist. There's literally zero effort made to make it make sense. The studio, writers, director, whomever wanted girl Smurfs, and so we got girl Smurfs. Damn the logic, damn the mythos, damn the history and source, damn the story, full speed ahead. The Rings of Power is following the same logic as that terrible Smurf movie. Damn it all, full speed ahead, and if you don't like our lack of effort, well then, you're a bad person, and a racist. When it comes to these types of fictions, the universe doesn't necessarily have to make sense, it just has to have rules. The Smurfs are delivered by a stork, they're all male, etc., that's the framework. But the reason why there are exceptions to these rules needs to be explained. The lack of explanations and backstory and mythos, again, in something as heavy-handed as a Tolkien-based series, is inexcusable. So because we don't have reasons, history, or story to explain the framework of Middle-earth in the shows, we are just expected to go with it. But we know that diversity, for the sake of it, was itself the stated goal of the showrunners and Amazon. And that leads us to the other problem with this forced diversity. It's that it isn't being done by honest people. This isn't about diversity, it's about hierarchy. It's a group of woke skulls who demand diversity, provided it's only ever done in one direction. It's inclusive in Hollywood to blackwash a white character like a Valerian, even if it makes no sense for the peoples. But heaven forbid you make a Wakandan character Hispanic, Asian, white, or other. That would be cultural appropriation. Or not accurate to the story, or source material, or. The pearl clutching would be endless. The only people who were forced to be diverse seem to be white people, and nearly all redheads for some reason. Because diversity is our strength so long as everybody else doesn't have to do it. If you doubt this premise, notice that one of the biggest shows on Netflix over the last few years was the very racist and ethnocentric Squid Game. The only non-Korean person in that show was the immigrant dude who was the dullard of the show. While he was probably the most likable person in Squid Game, had that show been made in America and all of the characters been made white except for the dullard who was black, the cries of minstrelsism and racism and would have been deafening. But the Koreans did it, so the racism and lack of diversity is fine. Worse, people patted themselves on the back for watching something non-white while pretending that a show made by and for Koreans, starring almost exclusively Koreans, somehow gave them diversity points. It's fine when every other culture, every other peoples, every other non-white nation on the planet plays to their ethnocentric base, but it's a social justice war crime if we don't tokenize everything in the West. The irony playing out is that the showrunners and Amazon have found themselves in the trap of the bigotry of low expectations. They think that people need to see themselves portrayed in the media they consume, hence the diverse casting, but that in and of itself should be enough. You, diverse person, don't deserve story, you don't deserve lore, you don't deserve mythos or intrigue, you should be happy, overjoyed even, and praising how stunningly brave and bravely stunning they've been by relegating those who look like you to the very minstrel roles they pretend to decry. Be happy they included you in the laziest possible ways and thank them for their service. Ultimately, what all this means is that the dishonesty and bigotry are the problems with the racial tensions in the show. If the showrunners had made the clan of dwarves all black, which at least might have made more sense, it would be called racist. If the dumb characters were all black, it'd be called racist. There are a million qualifiers that the woke scolds would have cried about, but the blatant tokenism isn't one of them, for reasons. Now, even demanding that the showrunners make it make sense is called racist by the cast, crew, and elsewhere, as the cult of inclusivity demands fealty to their irrational whims. Here in the real world, nobody generally besides low-tier trolls cares if a character is played by the best person regardless of race. We all love Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption, even though the casting isn't accurate to the source material or the character's name of Red. We love everybody in the very diverse original Predator. Hell, we love Sam Jackson in just about everything. But a lot of us are just annoyed by the modern standards of outright racism being portrayed as noble or honest, when it's not. Either you're fine with merit and quality acting being the baseline and don't think race matters in casting, as Netflix or Disney would have us believe, seeing as how they're likely to tokenize actual people from history, because what the fuck, or you're not. Open it all up and make it all make sense, or just be honest that you don't like white people and that you don't think we should be able to have our own culture. Tolkien was writing a Western European story. If you think it needs to be diverse because diversity is our strength, then I expect the same treatment of Asiatic, African, and all other stories and myths as well. I dare you to cast a few white American slaves. But we all know that nobody who is praising the diversity of Middle-earth would be okay with the same treatment of Wakanda, or El Dorado, or Shambhala, or Shangri-La, or. And that is the problem. It's not about diversity, it's about blatant racism wrapped in lies and flown under the banner of inclusion. Anyone who tells you anything else is trying to sell you something, probably a subscription to Amazon Prime. And that's all I have on this topic. Thanks for watching, listening, sharing, subscribing, yada 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 yada. Cheers.